Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating and air, restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. By viewers like you. Thank you.
It reflects the priorities of this community. Thanks for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Those were the words of County Board of Supervisors Chair Nora Vargas today, describing the county's new budget. KPBS reporter John Carroll looks at where some of the $8.1 billion will go.
It is the largest budget in San Diego County history. Revisions made since May added more than $60 million.
It should be a reflection of our priorities and values.
Here are some of the big items in the new spending plan: homelessness and affordable housing.
Our budget is committed to making sure that $25 million is going to help us build more affordable housing through the Innovative Housing Trust Fund, and $5.8 million to homeless prevention for families experiencing homelessness.
Plus, there is money for 2 more safe parking lots and increased access to so-called tiny homes. Mental health services, including treatment for drug and alcohol addiction.
This is really a pro people in need budget, and I'm super excited to have $500,000 to fight opioids in my district and through all our districts.
This budget includes an increase of $10.9 million for crisis diversion services to help expand our mobile crisis response team, the crisis line, as well as community engagement.
The environment. $3.5 million for the comprehensive tree program, which will help move the county toward its goal of planting 10,000 trees. And the county will complete the purchase of Butterfield Ranch in Valley Center and turn it into a community park. This was the last budget for the county's longtime Chief Administrative Officer, Helen Robbins-Meyer, and she sounded a note of caution.
But I do want to say that we are pushing up against our fiscal limits. I just want to make sure that all of our partners out there understand that we have to dampen our expectations next year.
The budget is bipartisan. It passed unanimously. John Carroll, KPBS News.
Governor Newsom and Democratic lawmakers have reached an agreement on nearly $311 billion state budget, and it covers a nearly $32 billion budget deficit through spending cuts, delayed spending, and borrowing. Highlights include more than $51 billion for climate programs, more than $5 billion for public transit agencies, and major changes to the state's building and permitting process. Hate crime reports in California are rising. KPBS reporter Katie Hyson looked at what changed last year.
Reported hate crimes rose 20% last year in California to more than 2,000. They were more likely to result in conviction, even if on lesser charges. They range from property crimes like vandalism to violent crimes like assault and murder. By far, the largest share of these were racially motivated against Black people. Though reported anti-Asian hate crimes fell by almost half last year, they're still at record highs not seen before COVID. Attorney General Rob Bonta says the data are not surprising.
The 2022 California Hate Crime Data Report shows us statistically what we already know, what we who work in our communities know to be true from our lived experience, that hate crimes are up.
Bonta connected the slew of anti-trans legislation across the country to the doubling of anti-trans and gender nonconforming hate crimes in California.
We're seeing action and data that follows the rhetoric.
Reports likely represent a small portion of committed crimes, and some groups may report at higher rates than others. A rise in reported hate crimes might also show that more people are able and willing to report. Katie Hyson, KPBS News.
Del Mar recently took another step in adding more affordable housing in the city. KPBS North County reporter Alexander Nguyen says the city is using a new state law to do it.
Land in Del Mar is at a premium, so it's a challenge to build more housing. but the city needs to build more of it to comply with the state's mandate for affordable housing.
Del Mar has been assigned 66 moderate income and 113 lower income units.
Del Mar City Council member Terry Gastelan says that's where the California Home Act, better known as Senate Bill 9 or SB 9, comes in. Del Mar as a city is completely built out. What SB 9 does is allow residents to split lots like these in half for additional housing. SB 9 went into effect last year and allows developers to split a residential plot zoned for a single-family home into duplexes or fourplexes. It's meant to spur more housing development in the state. The city recently approved an update to the municipal code to allow for that to happen.
Consent calendar passes unanimously.
The state law does not specify that some of these new developments be affordable, but the Del Mar ordinance does.
Our SB 9 ordinance requires that one of the new units created by a lot split or by simply building 2 duplex units on a lot will be affordable.
SB 9 also allows cities to add certain restrictions. Gastelan says their restrictions were crafted with residents' input and to help ensure that developments won't be met with legal challenges from neighbors.
And we did that to basically make it not have noise or light or privacy intrusion onto neighboring houses.
They are known as objective design standards, and they apply to window placement, retaining walls, fencing, lighting, and screening. A city staff report says 768 lots are eligible for SB 9 implementation, or nearly 40% of the city's residential lots. They are mostly located on the city's eastern side. Because Del Mar is a coastal city, the new ordinance needs the California Coastal Commission's approval before it goes into effect. Alexander Nguyen, KPBS News.
A ban on homeless encampments is headed to San Diego Mayor Todd Gloria's desk for signature. Today, the City Council voted on the final passage of the unsafe camping ordinance. It prohibits camping on all public land when shelter space is available, and it bans encampments near schools, parks, and canyons at all times. Gloria released a statement saying he looks forward to signing the ordinance into law. A county-wide state of emergency has been declared because of the sewage flows coming across the U.S.-Mexico border. The South County has been pummeled by nearly constant cross-border sewage flows since January. County supervisors are also calling for a federal emergency declaration for San Diego County to bring in more funding and speed up efforts to fix the problem. A San Diego State professor is trying to find a way to soften the blow of competitive sports. KPBS SciTech reporter Thomas Fudge shows us a new foam product that could prevent concussions in football.
So we'll do double action.
George Youssef is a mechanical engineer at San Diego State, and he has an emphasis in biomechanics, how the body's joints and limbs perform physical tasks. When San Diego State got into the NCAA basketball final, he was interviewed about the mechanics of a jump shot. But he's not a coach. His goal is to create sports equipment that helps athletes perform and be protected.
Our approach will be like how we can make a better shoe that the players can work with, or how we can make better materials that can be liner for the football helmet to reduce concussion, rather than what's happening to the body.
He says the injuries that come with sports are often the result of impact. This is especially true of a sport like football. For several years, he's been working on a new kind of foam that he says will make football helmets more protective. He says a protective helmet needs to do two things.
You want to reduce the impact amplitude, so the force amplitude, you want to reduce that as much as possible, and you want to spread it on time as long as possible. So another way, you want to allow the body to react naturally to the incoming load
and keep that load below a safety threshold. Youssef is not testing his helmet foam on the football field. In his experimental mechanics laboratory, he has tools such as this shock tube that subjects foam samples to various impacts. Sensors that mimic the human brain determine how dangerous the impact is when mitigated by the foam. The material his lab has created is not just one kind of foam. Eventually, Youssef says he wants to partner with a company that makes football helmets to see if concussions are reduced as players' heads collide with the ground and with other helmets. So what does he say to people who think football is too dangerous and we simply shouldn't play it? He says it's hard to stop people from doing the things they like.
Our job as engineers is to actually provide a safe way for them to enjoy whatever sport or activity they are trying to perform.
Thomas Fudge, KPBS News.
Cybersecurity has become a major concern for businesses, hospitals, and even school districts. KPBS education reporter MG Perez takes us to a summer camp offering lessons in online safety to high school students.
So go ahead and double click on that.
The lesson begins with some basic computer terms that these high school students use all the time. They come from campuses across San Diego County to learn more about protecting passwords and pictures and to better understand online descriptions and how to preserve downloads.
I do feel safe, but I do not feel private.
17-year-old Jonathan Yarconi will be a senior this fall at the Jacobs High-Tech High on Point Loma. This week, he is here at the University of San Diego, learning about cybersecurity, how to combat the criminals online committed to stealing personal data.
I'm not interested in giving out any more of my personal information to data brokers than I absolutely need to, but there's only so much you can do without going full paranoid and just losing internet functionality.
The field of cybersecurity is so wide open. There are jobs that are just not being filled fast enough.
Mark Castellano is the USD Manager of Cybersecurity and Engagement. He's helped coordinate the experts and curriculum for the Cyber Prep Camp. Tuition is $525, with some students receiving scholarships to attend. This is a family affair for Alexis Adias, whose older brother is a cybersecurity director with the popular TikTok app. She hopes to use what she learns here to help her father stay safe.
Maybe my father won't be as safe. He doesn't know sometimes when you go on a website, it automatically opens onto another website, onto ads that will try to download stuff.
Cybersecurity summer camp here at USD is certainly educational, and students are being exposed to the reality of an industry with some real legal consequences. San Diego Unified and almost 900 other school districts across the state are on the verge of a cybersecurity boost to protect data. Assembly Bill 1023 is expected to pass in the state Senate this summer and become law by the fall semester. It requires the California Cybersecurity Integration Center to share immediate cyber threats and provide support to targeted districts, county offices of education, and charter schools.
And would probably help even more some of the smaller districts in San Diego County that maybe don't have the large IT staffs, that aren't able to attract people with as much expertise in this area.
That problem might also be solved with these students someday. For now, they're working on creating a cybersecurity program for their homes to protect data and their families. MG Perez, KPBS News.
Californians could soon be paid far more for jury duty. A bill moving through state legislature now would give certain jurors $100 a day for serving on a criminal trial jury, and that's a big jump from the current daily rate of $15. The proposal was inspired by a pilot program in San Francisco, which also increased the racial and economic diversity of the county's jury pools. If passed, jurors in Los Angeles, Alameda, Kern, and Monterey will also be eligible for higher stipends. Right now, a multi-billion-dollar cleanup effort is underway in forests across the U.S. Crews are using chainsaws, heavy machinery, and controlled burns to thin out forests in an effort to turn the tide on worsening wildfires. After a delay last year, the Forest Service started taking down trees in Tahoe National Forest. Officials say dead trees and undergrowth provide extra fuel for wildfires.
I think this work is incredibly urgent. I think the forests as we know them in California and across the West, they're dying. They're being destroyed through fire. They're dying from drought, disease, and insects. And like I said, they're dying at a pace that we're having trouble keeping up with.
The efforts have, however, drawn criticism from some environmentalists and locals for cutting down too many trees. As the U.S. continues to grapple with severe storms and heat, the economy is starting to feel the impacts. Ivan Rodriguez explains what it means for your wallet.
Severe storms and excessive heat continue to hammer much of the country.
In the last 2 weeks, we've seen a dramatic increase in call volume for heat-related emergencies.
And the extreme weather is taking a toll on the economy and your wallets. According to NOAA, as of June 8th, there have been 9 confirmed U.S. weather and climate disaster events this year, with losses exceeding $1 billion. One industry taking a huge hit, airlines. More than 5,000 flights across the United States were delayed or canceled Monday as powerful storms ripped through parts of the country.
I'm just hoping and praying we don't have to deal with it, but we're ready if we do.
The Federal Aviation Administration estimated the cost of airline backups to be about $33 billion in 2019. Other sectors feeling the brunt: tourism, agriculture, and construction. For consumers, the rising temperatures means higher summer utility costs. According to the U.S. Energy Information Administration, average electricity prices are expected to rise about 2% from last year. Flood and home insurance rates are also on the rise. Experts fear the cost of insurance will only get worse as climate change intensifies both hurricanes and extreme rain events. I'm Ivan Rodriguez reporting.
As the weather continues to warm up, the county wants to help San Diegans keep cool. From now through October 31st, there are various designated cool zones at libraries, recreation centers, and other places throughout the county. And this year, they're expanding the Cool Fan program, which provides free electric fans to those who are 60 years or older, disabled, or living on limited incomes. Visit the San Diego County's Health and Human Services webpage for more information.
Now, from a temperature standpoint, we'll continue to see numbers running below the historical averages as we work our way into Wednesday, but there will be a warming trend late this weekend of the weekend, and it remains dry, though, as we take a look at the historical average rainfall now that we are into the month of June, almost into July. And typically here over these next couple of months, you see some low amounts. Not really until we get toward the latter half of September and October do we begin to see, from a climatological perspective, the rainfall start to increase once again. So it's not in the cards for tonight. Partly cloudy, will drop down to 62. There will be some low clouds, some fog along the immediate shoreline again throughout San Diego County. Chula Vista and Oceanside matching 59s. Down to 50 in Ramona. Hey, the need for the jacket perhaps venturing out. We're out the door early on, we should say, Wednesday. Borrego Springs down to 66, up to 100 as we work our way into Wednesday afternoon, but still cool. Look at that. Chula Vista, Oceanside. Yeah, we're only right around the 70 to 71 degrees. Ramona topping off at 80. You can even see here with Futurecast, yeah, look at the clouds right along the coast there throughout the overnight and continuing into the morning, as we'll start to see some improvement here as we venture our way into the afternoon. I want to take you through time here, and we are indeed looking at a bit of a warm-up even toward the coast. Some more sunshine coming up here later on this week. Look at that. Saturday and Sunday, we're into the mid-70s. Even more noticeable as we work our way towards some of those interior valleys. We'll go from the 70s on Wednesday into the 90s by Sunday. Lots of sunshine anticipated here Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Over the mountains, still cool the next couple of days, but we'll start to see abundance of sunshine, warm us back into the mid-70s Saturday into Sunday. And throughout the deserts, we're going to be talking about some major heat coming in, going into Saturday and Sunday. 1 teens back in the picture. For KPBS News, I'm meteorologist Justin Pavic.
3 years ago, the COVID pandemic was gathering steam, and that is when a San Diego company called Helix started processing thousands of COVID tests a day as they genetically mapped the mutating virus. KPBS SciTech reporter Thomas Fudge tells us about the changing virus and how Helix partnered with San Diego County to try to keep it contained.
And you might have heard about PCR COVID testing.
Mark Laurent shows me around a sprawling set of labs that Helix just opened in Sorrento Valley. The machinery we see takes Laurent back to the days of the pandemic.
For COVID, we ran them on these PCR machines here that essentially allows us to give us a yes or no answer. Do you have COVID or do you not have COVID?
But a thumbs up or down on a COVID test wasn't the only thing Helix learned from those samples.
Not on these machines. What we would do is we would take then the samples that actually were positive, people who had COVID, and then we would take them back to the beginning of the process and do what we call viral sequencing, which is essentially look at the detailed genome of each virus and understand how that virus has evolved and essentially understand what variant it is.
Mark Laurent is the VP of Operations at Helix. The genomics company partnered with San Diego County and others in 2020 to provide COVID testing to the public. During the pandemic and since then, it has also tracked COVID virus variants as the virus has turned from Alpha to Delta to Omicron and most recently to XBB.
At the peak of the pandemic, we were running about 30,000 samples a day. And that's a mind-boggling number.
He says the company had to hire more than 200 additional people, and it used a robotic testing system to meet the demand. A lot of tests coming in the door at Helix were from San Diego County. Nick Mascione is the director of the county's Health and Human Services Agency. He says early in the pandemic, it was clear the county's labs simply couldn't process enough COVID tests. Mascione says he asked just about everybody he knew how he could solve that testing dilemma.
I reached out to my friend Joe Panetta at Biocom. I said, are there any companies doing this? He mentioned a couple of them, and he also mentioned Helix.
Mascione says the arrangement set up with Helix was the foundation of the county's pandemic health system. COVID testing led to COVID tracing to track the virus in the population. Ultimately, mass vaccination centers like the one outside Petco Park gave thousands of people their COVID shots every day. Mascione now looks back on the testing partnership between Helix and San Diego County as novel and successful.
It was a public-private partnership, right, for the public good.
That partnership has ended up being worth more than $88 million in county contracts with Helix. Mascione insisted the price they paid during the pandemic, about $50 per test, was a good deal. It was about half of what other companies were asking for. Today, Helix is sequencing the genomes of both people and viruses in cooperation with health systems across the U.S. Shishi Lo is the company's head of infectious diseases. She says the coronavirus is pretty slow-moving compared to the flu, but it moved pretty quick during the pandemic.
I think when the COVID pandemic happened, there were just so many people getting infected that even if the base rate of mutation was lower, there was a lot more opportunity for the virus to replicate. And so you can have a lower mutation rate, but more replication, more infections, and you can also generate the same amount of change.
Today, Lowe says the latest dominant COVID subvariant called XBB has been in the U.S. since the beginning of the year. So far, it has not posed a serious threat.
There's enough pre-existing immunity, whether through vaccination or infection, that it would take a lot to cause a huge surge again. But we should also be prepared for the worst.
COVID samples continue to come to Helix for testing. Samples are also tested for other respiratory viruses like the flu. Mark Laurent says their lab will soon test for another contagious disease that's seen a recent outbreak, the virus called Mpox, formerly known as monkeypox. Thomas Fudge, KPBS News.
The USDA has approved the production and sale of lab-grown meat in the U.S. Supporters say it's a step forward in creating cruelty-free food and improving the environment. But as Jen Sullivan explains, not everyone is behind the move.
Meat without the slaughter. Lab-made animal protein from the companies Good Meat and Upside Foods is now clear for production and sale in the U.S.
We're just trying to make the same product people have loved their entire lives a different way.
But just because it looks the same, tastes the same, and is just as safe, would you eat chicken cultivated in a lab? Well, you won't see lab meat at your local store anytime soon. Here's what you should know now. 1. How is it made? The meat is made from animal cells and is grown in massive bioreactors.
We can produce a lot of muscle tissue directly from a very small amount of cells, and then we feed it to other people.
2. What are the benefits? Advocates of lab meat say it's a more environmentally friendly way to produce meat. Animal agriculture is responsible for a significant amount of greenhouse gas emissions, which contributes to climate change. 3. Is it safe? Both the FDA and USDA have said some lab meats are safe for human consumption. But experts say animal cells are prone to contamination and say it faces long-term production challenges.
Can you grow them at scale in such numbers that it will make it competitive with beef or any other, it could be fish or poultry? And our answer to that, based just on well-known principles of biotechnology or fermentation processes, it doesn't look very good.
4. What about the cost? The exact pricing is still unclear. And finally, when can you buy it? No exact date has been announced, but Good Meat said production started immediately after USDA approval. For Consumer Watch, I'm Jen Sullivan.
Have you been recycling your food scraps? A new report finds that California's landmark compost law that went into effect last year isn't close to reaching its organic recycling goals. The goal is to reduce food waste in landfills by 75% below 2014 levels by the year 2025. But an independent state oversight agency found it actually increased in 2020. The report recommends an education campaign incentive for community composting and postponing penalties for non-compliance enforcement, which are set to start next year. And here is a look at what we're working on for tomorrow in the KPBS newsroom. Big brands have become the most visible battlefields for America's culture wars. On NPR's Morning Edition, should companies take positions on social or political issues? And looking for a steamy beach read, KPBS Midday Edition has summer reading recommendations from a romance author. And you can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org. Thanks for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Good night.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating and air, restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.